All right, let me paint you a picture. The world's most powerful military launches what looks like a perfect, overwhelming strike. Total victory is declared in just 1 week. But then 4 weeks later, that same superpower is completely trapped. The global economy is an absolute freefall, and the war? Well, the war is strategically lost. This is the incredible story of how flawless military win led to a complete and total strategic failure. And really, this one sentence just nails the core paradox we're about to unpack. It's a story about a brilliant plan that had a single fatal flaw. It's about how modern warfare is no longer just about who has the biggest, baddest weapons, but about who can actually afford to keep fighting. So, let's start with the plan. The initial strategy, it seemed brilliant. It was a classic move, really, right out of the American playbook. It's called a decapitation strike. And the idea is pretty simple. You take out the leader, the whole regime collapses, and boom, game over. It really looked like a sure thing. And if you look at this timeline, the execution was just textbook. The strike on the leader's compound, precise. Within the very first hour, more than 900 targets were hit all across Iran. We're talking nuclear facilities, missile sites, command centers. By the end of week one, Iran's conventional military was basically dust. On paper, it was a total knockout. The US even declared victory. But as we're about to see, wars aren't fought on paper. This right here, this was the central, massive cultural miscalculation. The 86-year-old supreme leader apparently knew a strike was coming. He refused to go to a bunker and was killed right at his desk. Now, for Western military planners, that's a tactical win. But in Shia Islam, a tradition with a deep, deep history of honoring sacrifice, his death wasn't a defeat. It was seen as a martyrdom. And that one act didn't cause the regime to crumble. It united it. The conflict was instantly reframed as a holy war, a jihad. And this is the part that's strategically brilliant. In response, the entire Iranian military command structure immediately went from centralized to decentralized. Power just flowed away from that one single point to dozens of independent regional cells. And each one had its own orders, its own targets. So the whole premise of the US strategy, cut off the head of the snake, it was useless overnight. You simply can't decapitate a hydra. Okay, so with that old strategy foiled, the entire conflict shifted. It became a new kind of battle, one of economics, of endurance, and of a really wild mismatch in technology. And this is the heart of the whole story. On one side, you have Iran's Shahed drone. It's cheap. We're talking as little as $20,000. And you can launch it from the back of a totally ordinary-looking truck. And on the other side, you've got the American defense, a $4 million Patriot missile interceptor. It's fired from a massive, complex base that's literally visible from space. The difference in cost and mobility, it's just staggering. The numbers here really tell you everything you need to know. For every single dollar that Iran spends on one of these drones, the US has to spend somewhere between $80 and $200 just to try and shoot it down. Now look at the production numbers. Iran can pump out thousands of these things a year, while the US can only make a few hundred of the interceptors. The math is just brutal. This isn't a war anymore. It's a slow-motion bankruptcy. The source material uses this analogy that is just perfect. The American military was built for the Cold War, right? A contest of building the biggest, scariest, most expensive weapons to scare an enemy you never actually fight. It's the bodybuilder. But in this new world of asymmetry warfare, it's facing that scrappy fighter who could not care less about the size of your muscles. Effectiveness, not expense, is what's winning here. So, with this incredible economic advantage, Iran completely pivoted its strategy. It realized it didn't need to fight the US head-on. Instead, it could just target the very foundation of American power in the region, its allies in the Gulf. So why the Gulf nations? Well, let's be clear, they weren't neutral bystanders here. They were active participants. They hosted major US military bases, and they opened their airspace for those initial strikes. But in doing so, they exposed their core vulnerability. Their entire existence, all those glittering cities of glass and steel, is built on one single assumption: absolute, total security. And with populations made up of 90% foreign workers who are just there on visas, that sense of security is the only thing holding their entire societies together. And this is the ultimate vulnerability. A tiny 21-mile-wide stretch of water called the Strait of Hormuz. 1/5 of the entire world's daily oil supply has to pass through this little choke point, and it's sitting right on Iran's doorstep. It is no exaggeration, the jugular vein of the global economy. and the strategy to shut it all down was devastatingly simple. Iran didn't need a huge navy, it just had to announce the strait was closed and then prove it was serious by targeting a few ships with those cheap drones. Well, immediately, global insurance companies invoked their war risk clauses. Suddenly, not a single commercial ship could get coverage to enter the Gulf. In 1 week, just 1 week, tanker traffic dropped by 81%. The choke point was completely sealed. Now, this move didn't just create an energy crisis. No, it struck at the absolute heart of American economic dominance, a system that, frankly, most people don't even know exists. It's called the petrodollar system, and it is the bedrock of American economic power. Here's the deal, to put it simply. Gulf nations agree to sell their oil only in US dollars. This forces every single country that needs oil to constantly buy dollars, which keeps the dollar strong. In exchange for this, the US military guarantees the security of those Gulf nations. So, by shutting down the Gulf, Iran wasn't just stopping the flow of oil, it was taking a sledgehammer to this invisible scaffolding of the entire American economy. And the shockwave was immediate. You can see it here. The strait closes, insurance gets pulled. But what's really fascinating is the reverse flow. See, the Gulf states, they can't feed themselves. They import pretty much everything. So when the ships stopped coming, so did the food and medicine. While the rest of the world was panicking about oil hitting $126 a barrel, America's allies in the region were facing a complete societal collapse. And all of this, every piece of the puzzle we've just looked at, it leads to the final impossible position for the United States, a complete and total strategic stalemate. I mean, this slide just lays it out perfectly. It's an impossible choice. If America walks away, its security guarantees are proven worthless, the petrodollar system fractures, and all its credibility just evaporates. But if it stays, it's trapped in a war of attrition it absolutely cannot win, bleeding millions of dollars every single day to shoot down drones that cost less than a brand new car. So what did that initial decapitation strike actually achieve? The exact opposite of what it was supposed to. The regime didn't collapse, it consolidated. The hardliners took complete control. And this created a profound ideological mismatch. As one official put it, the US was now up against an enemy that wasn't just willing to fight, but was truly ready to die for their cause. And this brings us to the final critical question. The American empire was really built on the idea that its military power was so overwhelming that it created fear, and that fear commanded a kind of obedience. This conflict shows us a completely new reality. So the question we're all left with is this. In this new era of asymmetric warfare, what happens to an empire when its enemies simply stop being afraid?